Hi, this is Tasheena.
And this is Jonathan.
And this is We Watch What We Watch, podcast where Jonathan and I come together to talk and discuss movies and TV.
And today, continuing our Halloween-esque Halloween season double feature, did Deep Red last week, which for some reason got the most views of anything we've done.
Didn't know we had so many Giallo fans out there.
Yep. Must have hit some bot algorithm that everybody
It's probably all bots. Hope they enjoyed it.
Today we have Cure, 1997. It's a Japanese film by
Kiyoshi
Kurosawa. Yep.
There you go. Not related to the Kurosawa, by the way. I looked that up.
Oh, okay.
Didn't know if there was any nepotism like here in Hollywood.
So I guess I'll just jump straight into the summary.
Sure.
A frustrated detective deals with the case of several gruesome murders committed by people who have no recollection of what they've done. So when I first heard about this was right after you came home sighing after watching Longlegs. And I remember you said that your conclusion was that Cure was the better version of that.
Yes. I chose Cure to do now. That was a good cross between horror and like neo-noir because...
Noir, yeah.
Noir. Because November is noir month. Usually a lot of people watch old black and white detective movies at this time.
Definitely like the concept of Noir November better than No Nut November.
Yeah, I do too.
Just watching the expression on your face, like, why the fuck did he just say that on the podcast? Was worth it.
Were you saying
Brain just
that
stopped functioning for a second.
I probably did look like I just paused for a moment, like my brain just stopped.
Yeah. Just wanted to throw that out there.
No,
it's just a stupid concept for a month.
It is a very stupid concept for a month. I will grant you that.
Yes.
I don't understand it. All
right.
There's just certain random things, like social media things. I'm like, okay, whatever. But there's just some things I'm like, who thought of this? How did this come into being? Why are we torturing ourselves as a society?
This is one of the OGs, too, in terms of trends.
And honestly, torturing ourselves as a society probably goes back into our movie.
What are we saying? Noir.
So I chose this movie because I think on the outside, this looks like your typical detective type movie where, he has this case that he can't solve because these murders all seem unrelated to each other, but all the victims have an X carved into like the throat, upper chest area. And that's the only connection. So, he has that case he has to solve, and things at home aren't great. So since he can't solve his home problems, I will solve this case. And even his friend, the Sakuma, even gives lines like, "You're in too deep. You're too emotional.
You're a loose cannon."
And he does, there's parts where he, roughs up some of our witnesses. So he is we have tropes here. They're very similar to your detective. And then about halfway through, this almost supernatural type plotline comes in. You're getting it a little bit with our killer, but it really comes full force probably halfway through. And then things really kind of change in the type of story that we're telling. So our killer, he's on a different type of journey. It's kind of supernatural in nature. And so when they meet up in the middle, our detective story definitely changes courses and we get a different type of movie in the back half, which is definitely more horror. I feel like the first half is more thriller-esque in its mood. Yep. So that's one of the reasons why I think it presents itself as a certain type of structure and then you get something completely different, and I think it's a good different. And that's why I brought the parallel of Longlegs, because I felt like Longlegs was trying to do a similar thing where she's an FBI detective, and the case she's trying to solve, it's supernatural in nature. I don't know. It's just the way they did it. I really felt like the third act kind of shit the bed. While here, I felt like the reality and the supernatural came together in a better blend.
And also, I think that's, from what I understand of Longlegs, I have not seen it, but...
Hellsing.
Yeah. There's a certain Hollywood obsession with explaining everything.
And it did too much.
With MacGuffins, with specific steps, procedures, objects, spells, powers, what have you. Like, it... I mean, MacGuffin really is the right word, whatever form that takes, to give everything a tangible, metaphorically physical objective of the protagonist and antagonist's goals and how the audience follows the story. Whereas something like Cure has none of those things. Maybe a little bit with
some breadcrumbs.
The mesmerism angle.
I think people are saying there's breadcrumbs here, which I think you can get. So you can come to maybe your own conclusions or your interpretations,
which is good. I mean, it's fine with those breadcrumbs being there as a way, to divert. Like, what could it be? It could be this. It could be that. But it never outright links the two together in a way that makes you go, "This is it," which leaves you feeling. Which leaves probably certain audience members feeling unsatisfied, but is a much better way of driving home the themes and the purpose of the story at a larger scale than just a series of plot events. Because then a lot of people really get hung up on those plot events, and you miss missing the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
Whereas because you don't get those answers in the plot, you're forced to look at the themes and the message at a more abstract level, which I like.
I feel like a lot of the Reddit discussions I saw were that they were trying to like come up with like the backstory, like the plot, the narrative of like what happened. And I'm like, that can be fine, that's fun, but it's not the most important questions I have about this movie. And what the answers that I want are more about what is the director trying to say with these themes, with these actions. Because a lot of it feels deliberate. These are deliberate choices. And so for him, the director, there's definitely like, there might be a through line. I think, a lot of people seem to be concerned about things that I'm like, I don't.
And again, it's not that,
I particularly don't feel concerned about,
Right. And it's not that, I'm saying plot-based movies are bad or anything. That would be a ridiculous statement. But not every movie has to have such a literal and laid out and well-outlined plot to it.
Perfect A to B to C type plot,
But many movies, I feel like, treat it as one of those obligatory elements, especially nowadays that online discourse and certain kinds of movie criticism that almost exclusively follow plot are so popular. It's starting to feel like having a plot like that is almost a mandatory ingredient, almost like throwing in that obligatory like action scene or what have you, like, oh, we just have to put this somewhere to make this demographic happy.
Yes.
And okay, we got to do all these plot things to make these people happy. And I think you see this, especially in a lot of older films or foreign films where that isn't the case. And in modern films too. It's not that they're all that way, but it is interesting to see that Longlegs suffered from this despite being an A24 release. Therefore, you would think it wouldn't. You would think, on its face anyway, when you first look at that, it wouldn't fall victim to that sort of thing because it's supposed to be seen as this more prestige brand, and yet it still succumbs to the same basic flaw that so many of these other more generic productions do.
For me, I feel like there's a big difference between pre and post COVID A24.
Oh, really?
I feel like pre A24, before they became like the it studio, was giving us things with probably more along the lines of Cure. I don't know. I feel like after there's been a switch. I feel like they were starting to drink their own Kool-Aid a little bit. And they still put out great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're getting more into we wanting
mainstream
popularize, to where I don't think it, to me, A24 is not like a guarantee like it's going to be quality, you know? Like before, you know, we got stuff like The Witch, Hereditary, bangers.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, now I'd say I definitely lean more towards like that, Neon. They're not, there's no guarantees there. Do we want to get into spoilers? 'Cause I feel like the things I want to talk to, they're like, we're going to go into spoilers with Cure.
Yeah.
Okay. So, great movie. Go see it.
Definitely.
I'm doing my thumbs up.
It's available on Criterion.
Yes, that's where
I guess one of the only places it's available. Yeah, check it out. All right, so getting into spoilers.
Yes. So, I don't even know how to explain the killer. Like,
yeah, so when you first see him...
him wandering on the beach.
Well, we start with one of the murders.
Yes.
Which is played very interestingly. It reminded me also of like a Wes Anderson style. It had this
bebop music.
Yeah, it had this sort of hokey music with these big, like, wide, flat shots fixated on specific points as like this person walked by, looked at something, grabbed something, but you don't really see what he grabbed. You just see the aftermath. You know, another wide shot of in the apartment, and then suddenly this very non-assuming visual style and direction and score are shattered by he takes this club and beats someone to death.
Yes.
And that's definitely that's the movie. That sort of calm outburst of violence when you least expect it.
That is definitely the horror of the movie, is that anytime could be peaceful, bright, sunny day, and then a murder happens.
Yeah.
You don't get any type of like music cue, like, ooh, something's going to happen. Nothing.
Yeah, I think after that opening scene, there basically is no or not much of any music after that until...
I think the very end.
The very end.
It's mostly background noises we hear, which we can go into that later.
And so we start with just the murder.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the detective's first introduction to all this. And then slowly with each consecutive murder, you see more of the killer and their process. So in this first one, you have seen nothing. You have no idea.
Yes, we just see the aftermath. Yes.
And so you're assuming, okay, you're following this person. But then they catch him immediately.
I think what's great also about that scene is that it shows the detective's abilities, because he finds that guy pretty quickly. Everybody's like, we're going to do a search and we're going to canvas the area. And he just looks into this little, I don't even know, like a little storage,
like a laundry chute or something.
And he looks in and this guy is just butt naked hiding in a vent.
Yep. And so you get your first little subversion of expectations there, where you expect, oh, okay, it's a manhunt. Now it's not. They caught him. But he doesn't know why he did it.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where we meet the psychiatrist, Sakuma, who is watching the tape of the guy talking, and just also the calm nature of how he's describing what he did. It's kind of off-putting. So, you know, he's like, yeah, he's doing the whole, like, the devil made me do it type spiel. Right. We also find out, I think at this point, it's the third, because I think there's 2 more murders like this prior.
That happened before, yeah.
That happened within, like, the last month or 2. And same thing, just all of a sudden, they're brutally murdered, and they have the cross, the X on them. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, there's got to be a connection. But it's so random.
Yep. And also people who had no, like, prior history, no reason to...
Just regular people.
Yeah, regular people who had no issues with the person that they killed, at least not that were known, which I think is important. no apparent issue with their victims.
Just all of a sudden.
And so then the second person we see, this is where we actually see the killer for the first time.
Yes.
And it's on a beach, and he's sort of wandering around, and it's like he has amnesia, right? And he doesn't seem to know who he is, where he is. He keeps asking where he is, who he is. He keeps forgetting things that people tell him, at least appearing to forget things that people tell him immediately before.
He runs into a guy who looks like probably around 30. He's a teacher, and he's like, what is this guy doing? Just wandering the beach, not knowing where he is. So he brings him back to his house to help him out. And, just ask him questions like, well, do you know your name? Do you know this? What's on your person? But every time he tries to ask the stranger a question, the stranger turns it back and starts asking the teacher questions. And the teacher's like, why are you asking me questions? We're trying to find out about you. You're the one who have amnesia, dude.
Yeah, and it start here, the victim's pretty willing to go along with it. Later on, you see it really starts to this line of like turning the question back at you really gets frustrating.
Yes. Yeah, this guy is a little bit more like kind of just more like what's going on, but he's not upset by it.
And you can sort of explain away like, okay, yeah, he has some sort of amnesia or memory problems, so clearly he's able to weaponize that really effectively into guiding the direction of the conversation always back to the person asking the questions of him.
Because every time we see the killer, they give us a little bit more of like his process, like what he is doing.
And how effective it is despite you thinking that it shouldn't work, but it does.
Because there's a scene, and we'll talk about it later, where for me it churned the tide in how I saw the movie, and it actually really got under my skin. So before we leave the scene with them two, is that where he turns the lighter on and then he's like, tell me about your wife?
Yeah, and he mentions some specific detail about her.
Her pink necklace. I'm like, oh.
So that's like your first hint that there's something more to him than what he's letting on, because it's a specific piece of information which he wasn't told, and if he's suffering from memory issues, how do you remember? But that gets the guy's attention. Like,
yes.
Wait, what? But then we sort of cut away, and we don't see how that goes until later when find out he has now killed his wife, and he like throws himself out the window.
Yes.
Once he realizes what he's done. And
it is jarring. You're just on a shot outside the house, and then you just see him literally fly out the window. Fly out the window through the glass. He didn't open it. It's just almost like a running jump through the glass.
Again, another peaceful, otherwise normal scene shattered in an instant by a severe outburst of violence.
And the aftermath, it looks horrific. Like the blood, the bed has blood all over it. So they're there looking at it. They talk to him. And I don't know if you can explain how the husband is. It's weird. It's almost like a daze and an acceptance. But then at one point he's like, wait, I killed my wife? And then it like floods back into him.
Starts freaking out.
It's like an ebb and flow of like this weird acceptance, but I killed my wife. It's a very interesting back and forth to where even I think the psychiatrist, I don't think he knows really what's happening, but he's starting to get an idea like, oh, this is just not a simple like people lie and saying like the devil made me do it. Like there's something here. So you could tell he's a little bit more intrigued. Is this where we see the killer on top of the roof?
Basically, he ends up in a police box after like jumping from a roof. So a police officer brings him over there and gonna send him to the hospital. And he starts talking to him.
It's an older gentleman.
Yeah. And there's another younger cop there. And again, here you start to reveal even more of his process. You see him pull out that lighter, which we already did see, but now we see the effect it appears to have on the cop. So after the younger cop leaves the room, it's just the older cop there. He pulls out the lighter, and he appears entranced by it. And that's when he starts continuing his line of questioning. So again, just each one we get more and more of.
Because we also get a little bit more of like the dynamic between the two cops. Because the husband and wife, we didn't really get much. She made some tea for them and went upstairs. Here, there's a little bit of contention with the younger officer being like,
rules,
regulations. The guy's like, let's smoke some cigarettes. Yeah, it's no problem here. And he's kind of, I don't know, just feels like he's rolling his eyes at his younger guy. And so the younger cop, I think that's why he does his rounds. He's just like, I don't want to be around this rule breaking. Bye.
Yeah, so this is the first hint that that the person actually does have some sort of deep set loathing of their victim. So at this point, the guy's gone, the killer. I think he's been sent off to the hospital at this point for his leg.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, because he said he sprained his ankle.
Yeah.
From the fall.
And you get probably one of the best scenes in terms of horror, because it's the next day. It's just this static shot of the front of the police box. It's like sunny. There's birds chirping.
Birds are chirping.
The two cops are getting ready to do their, go about their duties.
Their daily business.
And walk around, okay. And then at one point, the older cop just looks at the other one, pulls out his gun, and shoots him in the back of the head.
Nothing registered on his face at all. He just pulls out, kills him, goes into the police box, takes out an X-Acto knife, it looks like.
And does his thing.
And you could tell he's looking and he's trying to figure out, but you know what's going to happen because the cut's like right before he has to do it. But it's like, holy crap.
So again, over and over again, this calm, otherwise peaceful, normal, familiar environment. We're not in a spooky gothic mansion or something that's like priming you. It's
not in the woods.
Normal, everyday environment. The house next door, a police, and I think here it's especially effective because it's a police station. It's
which
the
is
law,
supposed
safety.
To be, it's supposed to be. And the next place is a hospital. Like these places of like supposed safety.
Yeah, it goes. So it's like hotel. Okay. The first one is definitely a great like hooking you in and transitioning you in a way that doesn't jar you too much too quickly. Because even though it is jarring with the sudden nature of it,
because he was with a sex worker, right?
So it's like prostitution, seedy hotel.
Even when the cops there was like, oh, like who figures this would happen,
So this is a very typical noir setting.
Yeah, because this is 97.
Prostitute.
Yeah, exactly.
Who killed her? All this stuff.
Exactly.
Very classic. It's very smartly done that it gives you this scenario that you're used to in these stories. Presents the sudden outburst of violence so that at least you can accept most of it, and then it gets progressively more intimate. Then it goes to someone's home, then police station, hospital, home, police, hospital, health, safety, or it's all like things that should be very familiar to you and also very safe. And a bathroom, I guess technically it's the bathroom, but it started in a hospital.
Oh, he hypnotizes. That's true.
Yeah,
but he hypnotizes still, like, in the hospital. But also, you're right.
Again,
it's bathroom.
Familiar.
Oh man,
vulnerable.
The ideas don't want to tag me in the bathroom. I hope God never happens. Also, we've forgotten the troubled home life is his wife Fume, who has amnesia problems herself.
It was very interesting that they did the same. Because actually, that's how the movie opens. It opens with her.
It opens with her.
Not the hotel.
And I guess her doctor's appointment, and she's reading the story Bluebeard, which, is about a husband who kills his wives because they found out their secret, and he puts them in the closet, and the next wife comes. And I believe it's like almost like a pattern. They find out about the dead wives and then become a dead wife. So I think, and that's why she's like, oh, I know the ending of the story. The daughter kills Bluebeard because she outsmarts Bluebeard and doesn't become a dead wife. Because I was interested. I was like, wow, why are they starting with like the husband, the killer husband? So
I wonder if it also it's also kind of like is Bluebeard the killer? What's his name?
Oh, the killer in the movie.
Yeah, how do they?
So we
that?
find out his name is Mamma Mia.
Oh no. So Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia. I just feel like it's important to point out Fumi because she is important to the detective. Is it Takabe? Takabe, yeah.
So all throughout this,
journey.
he's been dealing with his wife who's sick. She has memory issues,
He'll come
dementia
home.
or amnesia or something.
He'll come home and the spin cycle will be on in the washer, but there's nothing in there.
Yeah. So he's constantly going over to the dryer, turning it off, saying there's nothing in there.
And we see one point where she goes, turns it back on, and he just is sitting there.
So all throughout when he's home, there's almost always this dryer sound going.
Yes.
Which is also one of the creepiest sounding dryers I've ever heard. But it's a really effective, like, deep buzzing, droning sound that really gets into the back of your head.
Yes.
One thing that was pointed out to us later is not only is it at home, but you start to hear it everywhere he goes, too.
Yes.
Which is an interesting touch.
I think in particular, there's a scene where him and Mamma Mia are talking, and you definitely, I after that, I definitely heard the dryer sound. It's almost like, the sounds that can, like, make you crazy. They just keep going, going, and they just won't stop. Because he even says, right after he says, my head is about to split open. That's when I noticed the sound. So,
but otherwise, when you see him interacting with his wife, he does seem to care. He's obviously tired because he's, working the shop and trying to take care of her, and
doesn't know how to help her. I think that's the frustration, because it doesn't seem like they really know what's up. Just that she has these bits of amnesia, because we see her trying to go to her doctor's appointment and she gets lost. Like, we keep cutting back to her.
Confined at this point. She is still trying to live a normal life,
and he's telling her, we're going to go on a trip after this case is done. Let me just get through this case. We'll go on a trip. And I'm like, like, that's never going to happen.
3 days before retire.
Exactly. They find the cop. Do they interview the cop before we see him with the doctor? I can't remember what order it's in.
Before you see who the doctor? Oh, I don't know.
Mamma Mia and the doctor.
But we have these two scenes. So one, they interview the police officer.
Which I feel like that was very enlightening.
Yeah, so this is their first hint that there was actually some sort of resentment there. Because he openly says that he didn't like his partner. And
I like how the psychiatrist is like, we've all wanted to kill our coworkers, but we don't do it. Why did you do it?
And Takabe really, really presses him here about, did you talk to anyone else? There was someone else, wasn't there? They're always in this fog. They always think they haven't talked to anyone, but he's starting to, like, break. He's like, maybe there was, I don't know.
That's right, because at this point, the detective has in his mind, they're like, are these people, are they being hypnotized? Is something going on here? Because he's talking to this psychiatrist friend about it. And this is when the psychiatrist drops some interesting nuggets that I think are important for later on. Because he says, first, when you hypnotize somebody, you can't go against their base nature. So if they think murder is evil and immoral, you can't make them kill somebody. Also, suggestion, especially on this level, would take such a long time. Yet we're seeing this sort of suggestion happen pretty quickly.
And so they're really pressing him. And at one point, and they keep shining this, like, light in his eyes to try and get him to, like...
I would be fucking annoyed too.
to remember and sort of evoke the same, like, circumstances to get him to trigger again. And at one point he does do this really weird thing where he...
goes to get coffee.
Yeah, goes to get coffee, but he's, like, sort of in a daze. And he gets, like, it
looks like a
little stir,
Yeah, like a plastic
And
thing.
he goes up to one of the other cops who's just like, what are you doing?
They're like, let him do whatever he's going to do.
And he draws the X
into the cup with, like, the, like a pretend almost the plastic
like
thing.
Does the motion.
If I was that cop, I'd be, like, peeing my pants.
Like, what did you just do? He's like, I didn't do anything.
Oh, yeah. That is so scary to me.
Yeah.
You literally just did this.
And so now you're starting to see, they're starting to piece it together in terms of, okay, so hypnosis. We're on to something.
Yes.
You're starting to see, like, how creepy this is. And coming up here, leading into what happens next, the impression that I have is they're never going to catch this guy. And you can see how hard it would be because he's not doing anything, so he's not leaving any evidence. He's just talking to other people. How do you prove it? How do you catch him if no one remembers him and he's an amnesiac with no identity? How do you ever?
This is the perfect crime.
Yeah. How do you ever find him? And it's like, oh wow, this is gonna be impossible to find him. So that's what you're thinking. He does end up going to the hospital. For his leg. He's just sort of floating around. He's not like he's trying not to be caught. He's just floating.
Because I do think there's something to what he tells the doctor. Because, he sees the doctor. They kind of do that back and forth thing.
Tell me about yourself. No, tell me about you.
And he's like, can I smoke? She's like, nah, dog. This is the hospital. You can't smoke in here. Yep. And so he spills a cup of water. And she goes into a trance while she's watching the water. And he says, oh man, I wish I wrote it down. He says, in essence, like this cup of water, he poured himself out. So he can pour pretty much these people in to himself. So like this cup of water, he is on the outside. And I really think...
he's like, I'm on the outside, so there's nothing in, like, I'm empty inside.
I don't think... like this amnesia thing, I don't think it's like a bit. I think a part of it is he literally doesn't know himself because that's how he's able to do this.
Yeah.
There is a part of himself that is lost. Now, how much is true, how much is not, I don't know. But I do believe that he had to give up himself to be able to do this. Because it's so quick how he's able to gather this information about her. Like, we see his process, and it is almost like he is pouring this information into himself. Like, he starts with these couple of questions, and something about these couple of questions, it's like he's able then to access the information from inside them.
This is a great example of those nuggets of explanations of MacGuffins or whatever you want to call it. It's enough for you to latch onto something and fill in the blank and start thinking of theories.
Yes.
Okay, I can see what he's saying, so somehow this is how he's able to do it. But it's not like I found a secret book in the temple of the Egyptian pharaoh and I received the power of the darkness, which now gives me these very specific things, which you can see on my trading card here, lists 30 damage and 40 mana cost. Like, that's sort of like super detailed, like,
because we never
ridiculousness.
Find out. We never find out the actual process of how he learned to do this. All we know is, yes, there was some kind of pouring out of himself, and he's able to do it with ordinary elements and objects. Fire, water, vibrations, just lights in general.
And that reminds me, something else I didn't notice until later. We see throughout, there's obviously his flame, right, his little lighter, but there's other blinking lights and other these like suggestive elements throughout the film. In the beginning, with the guy with the pipe, there's this light on the subway, on the tunnel, that flickering.
So when that guy saw the flickering of the light, did it trigger?
That's what I'm thinking.
Like his hatred of women or something.
The police officer, before he goes into his thing, he's looking at a blinking light on the charger of his walkie-talkie.
Yes.
And there's also a point where Takabe sees blinking light of a train stop. I'm trying to remember when exactly that happened.
That train stop I know is important.
Yeah.
Because they really focused on that train stop.
They really focused. But again, you see there's always these hypnotic elements going on in the film too, which makes you start to fear any of these ordinary things.
It's not just light. With the doctor, it seems like how he used the water to hypnotize her. The overflow of water in the bathroom, I think, is what triggered her.
Right. Yeah.
So that might be something where whatever kind of hypnotized him might be the release. Who knows? That's a theory. There's all kinds of theories.
Exactly.
At least that's what I'm going with.
Right. You can go really deep into like these theories on plot of like, okay, what was the exact trigger and cause, and when did, trying to figure out timelines and series of events, which is fun. But also it's like the fact that it's a lighter water, a blinking light, a train stop, a charging light. These are all normal, ordinary things. And combined with the fact that you've already seen these murders happen in broad daylight when you least expect them, it makes you start to fear everything, which I think is ultimately the purpose. It's to make nothing safe anymore. It's making you not look at the stereotypical things of like dark corners or monsters or whatever or spooky environments. You're fearing everything now, even things that should be innocuous.
So the doctor pretty much, I think, just hates men and wanted to be a surgeon.
She ends up a general practitioner. He talks about how, well, you're just a woman, you're inferior. And she's like, what? Isn't that what people said to you when you were trying to become a doctor? And that you weren't good enough because you were a woman. But remember when you were training and you dissected that man, don't you just want to cut up a man?
Do that again. So that's probably the most graphic of the kills. They show her cutting up a guy and peeling his face back.
Yeah.
While another guy walks in and he just looks and he's just like, oh.
Yeah, this guy walks in and sees her, runs off, but she doesn't like freak out. She just
keeps going, doing what she's doing. That is so, I'm telling you, this is scary. Though, just the calmness.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like homicidal rage is not there.
In fact, the only rage we see in the whole movie is from the protagonist as he's trying to figure this out and getting angry with
punching up. Wrapping them up. The psychiatrist going, no, you can't do this. You're in too deep.
So following this hospital scene, the police get a tip. Hey, there's a suspicious person in the hospital. And they go there and they corner him and they capture him. So after this going, man, they're never going to catch this guy. He's too good. Because you're thinking still probably at this point, a serial killer, someone who's trying not to be caught. But he is really just floating around, and where he floats lead him to
wherever he
goes,
arrested. He goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's at a police station, okay.
So that's like one of the big twists here is, they caught him now. So isn't the movie over? No.
Oh, no.
No, it is not.
Oh, no. If it was a regular detective story, maybe.
And so we saw the interview with Kurosawa and...
Oh, is it Hamaguchi?
Hamaguchi,
the last name?
who did...
Evil Does Not Exist.
Which we talked about.
Which I also loved. And apparently, Hamaguchi studied under Kurosawa because Kurosawa taught at, I think, the University of Tokyo Arts Department. And so, which I hope he's proud because Hamaguchi's a pretty great filmmaker.
It was interesting, something they talked about in there. One of them being, their decision to use the water for the doctor wasn't because of something they'd written. It was because they were filming at a real hospital and they told they couldn't use the lighter. It's like, oh, we need something else. Let's use water. But
it works. It's one of those things where sometimes you hit speed bumps and it's how you handle them, because sometimes switching something, even at the last minute, can actually help your movie.
Yeah.
I think it really did help because it's not only just fire and light, it's now water. It is everything ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forgot, what were we talking about?
They caught him at the hospital.
Oh, yeah. So he had mentioned, the director had mentioned seeing, Silence of the Lamb. And
yes,
thought it was interesting having a movie where your main, villain, at least one of them, is already captured. And how does that play out? So that gave them the inspiration to do this, where they actually do catch him halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? How does it play out from there? Which is interesting.
Because each conversation the detective has with Mamma Mia is very different from the next one.
Yes.
The first one is kind of more your typical detective story where he's trying to get answers.
Yep.
How'd you do this?
Laying out the pictures, and, doing all that stuff.
And you talked before about people getting upset, like getting irritated by his questions. The detective
is having none of it.
The guy is like, why do you have these pictures? Blah, blah, blah. He does a really good job of kind of coming off as a bit dopey.
Yeah.
With his questions, where I don't know if I would get mad and just be more like, are you okay?
What's your email? I don't know. What do you do? Well, I'm a detective. Why? No, I'm asking the questions. What are you doing? Why do you have those pictures? It's part of my job. Do you like them? No. Why do you have them? Because of my job. What's your job? I'm a detective. So it's always this circular, roundabout stuff where you can see why it frustrates and gets under everyone's skin.
But do you notice it is the people with the most authority, quote unquote, that are the most frustrated?
Yeah, especially the
detective.
The police are not used to this.
And it wasn't like a commissioner or something when he's talking to a bunch of cops who, as soon as he gets any blowback from this guy, the commissioner about loses his shit. Like, I thought he was gonna jump him. And I thought that was interesting how, because he is almost kind of like climbing the ladder in essence when he's also talking to these people. And in terms of like position of power. And the more power they have, the more frustrated they are by his questions.
Yep.
After this conversation is where we finally figure out who this dude is. Mamma mia. We finally get his name. And he is, so this went by real quick. I hope I got all this right. He was a college student. He was living, was it by some kind of plant?
He was living like in a plant. He was like living where he worked, I think.
Okay, because he has a burn mark on his back. And it looked like, if you like laid up against hot metal.
Yeah, they figure out where he works. They find his apartment. And they go there.
From the apartment, it looks like, I don't know if it started while he was in college. He found out about this guy, but he went on pretty much his own path. Like, he dropped out of school and just devoted all of his time to learning about Franz Mesmer.
As in mesmerize.
Who was German, I believe.
Was it German or French?
I know he spoke German, so that's why I thought he was German. But I know they speak German in a few countries, so who knows? He's from the 17th century. He had the theory of animal magnetism, which is pretty much the theory of like how to do hypnotic suggestion. We get at least that piece of the puzzle. It's like, okay, so this is somehow this is based in this studying he did, because there's like all types of animals in the cages. There's also this creepy thing where it looks like a dried up monkey attached to this.
It's some pretty creepy. This is probably the creepiest in a traditional sense location that we see throughout the movie.
This definitely looks like a Unabomber house.
Yeah. Serial killer vibes because of like animal experimentation. Yeah, you see like
loner.
It's like a mummified monkey corpse strung up
in like this weird position, but it pops up again. I think there's something to this monkey.
Well, also you see there's been an X carved in it. The vibe I got from this was like early experiments. Like he started with animals, then moved on to people, which is usually the serial killer pipeline.
So what is it? Something is then triggered in our detective, because after he looks at this Unabomber hut, he goes into his car and he sees like a couple of snapshots. This is where things turn. This is where we go from everything is kind of like, it has some grounded reality.
Right.
I think this is the very first time it starts to diverge, because he's getting like these images while he's in the car, and then he seems upset. He rushes home. He goes in his house. He looks in the kitchen, and his wife has hung herself. And oh man, I just remember, because this is the third time I've seen this, and I remember the first time I saw this. It's very difficult to see because I felt like his reaction was actually really realistic.
Yeah.
Like there's no like scream, like he just like a silent scream. Like he's there just like,
yeah,
can't process what he is seeing. And it's quiet and it is silent scream. And then all of a sudden we hear like a vacuum cleaner going and the blender and his wife looking over going, "What's going on? Are you okay?"
Yep.
It was all in his mind. So what? It's like, what was that trigger?
Did he get those images as soon as he got in the car, or was it as he was? I'm trying to remember.
I thought he left the hut and went into his car, and then that's when
immediately, or as he was driving somewhere else in the middle of his drive. Was it in the middle of his drive, or as soon as he got in the car?
I thought he just got in the car and sat.
I still remember being further on.
Oh, we might have to rewatch it.
Yeah, at some point, something triggers. Yeah, you're right. This is their first like
Oh.
It's something actual supernatural.
Because he believed this was real. That reaction, he thought he saw his wife die. And she's not. And then this is where he is then kicking ass and taking names as he goes back to the killer. He finds out the killer has been transferred.
It's like a mental institution.
And he's actually not allowed to see anybody.
Yep, because he's too angry.
Well, the psychiatrist, I think, was also, I wonder if he was trying to protect his friend. Because, I mean, yeah, this guy can do hypnotic suggestion, and the detective in a very vulnerable state.
Maybe, yeah. I interpret it as just that, in every other scene, this guy's been with him, and he's basically tried to assault him.
Yes.
And so more was me like, you're not allowed to see him.
Oh, no, I do think that too, but I also think but yeah, at the emotional state, this guy, these two should not interact in any sense of the word.
That doesn't stop him.
Oh, no, because he just tells the guy there, let me in. He's like, okay, I'm not supposed to.
Doesn't he beat him up? Or is that later?
That was after. That was after because he found out he was.
Yeah, so he goes and talks to him. And so here you see a very different kind of conversation play out because this is the one, right, where the detective is a little more in control than his usual victims, where he keeps trying to get out his lighter, but he bats it away. Like, he's sort of onto him a little bit in that he knows that the hypnotist is an angle, so he gets rid of all his usual things, which kind of catches his Mamma Mia's attention a bit, and he starts bringing up stuff about his wife.
Yep. Because I wrote down something that he said. It must be hard being a detective with a crazy wife, pretty much. And so, who are you? The detective or the husband? Which is the real you? Neither is the real you. There is no you. Your wife knows that too. And I think that is the key to the center of our detective. He's split into two people. And I don't think he can be two people anymore. And he has to choose because he's neither.
Yep.
And sadly, we see the choice he makes at the end. And this also clued me into, because the whole thing that the psychiatrist said was, you can't go against their base nature. So what does that mean about humanity?
Yeah, that's the point I got from is, if they fundamentally think that murder is wrong, they won't do it. And I think that's the implication, is that deep down, more people than you'd realize don't.
Yeah. And especially in this time, Japan was big repression society and he even said it too. He's like, the detectives are like, I don't know. I never learned how to handle my feelings and my emotions. I had to hide them because I'm a detective. So I had to he had to push all this down. And because he had to push all that down, he now cannot connect with his wife and he doesn't know how to help her. He is disconnected from her because of his job, which he has to be disconnected. He actually can't be this emotional and still be a good detective like he is around the killer. These two cannot, for him, coexist. And it's not just Japanese. We see it a lot here too, this repression. Honestly, I think it's interesting because this was made in 1997, so maybe was definitely talking more to the Japanese audience at the time. But I think this is actually a good movie for us now, especially what's going on politically and what's happened. There's a lot of anger. And I'm like, you know what? I think he wouldn't have a hard time doing this right now in America, finding people who are just so angry. Because there's one little scene in the very beginning where he's going to get his dry cleaning, and there's this guy right next to him. And as the dry cleaners are trying to find his, this guy's stuff, he's just muttering angry to himself. Oh, I can't believe they're doing that. Just this seething anger. And then as soon as the dry cleaner comes back, he gets shut off. He gets his dry cleaning and he leaves. You only see this guy for a second. And the seething anger is so clear that it's boiling over. He can't even suppress it anymore.
Right.
It's just like when he thinks he's by himself and nobody's watching, the anger is bubbling. And I think this movie is just as prevalent today as it was in 97. And I think that's why a lot of people are discovering it right now. I think it's really speaking to a lot of people how close the anger is underneath the surface. Like it's just about to boil over. And so, because I was wondering, like, why now for Mamma Mia? I guess he was studying, but it's like, it could have been this was the perfect time as well.
Yep.
So just a lot of, oh my goodness. I think that scene in particular between the two of them is great. I think a lot is going on. I've watched it multiple times. It's great. It's great acting, great blocking. The script is amazing in that scene.
And it ends with, so he had previously knocked his lighter to the ground, and he gets it back out. He's like, "What? Can't talk without your lighter?" So he lights it and puts it next to him. And then the mood starts to change a little bit, and it starts raining.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an old dilapidated insane asylum, I guess. It's really cool. You see the lights go down, and you start to hear the rain, and you get a shot looking up at the detective, and you see the ceiling above him as the spot starts to fill above the ceiling and leak water. And some drops come down and extinguish the lighter, and he looks down, and you can tell that he got him. Just like the water from the hospital scene, the hypnotic effect has triggered off of this, which again opens up more questions of like, does this guy have the power to control the weather? Like, it just opens more of those supernatural doors. Yeah.
Can control the weather.
It just opens more of those doors leading down the supernatural path that leaves you questioning. You're wondering, like, what kind of a force is he facing here? What are we dealing with?
Yes.
It's something a little bit beyond what you might understand, which again just adds to the tension. And yeah, after that, he comes out and beats up somebody.
Because he's like, "How do you know about my wife?" And he's like, "The other detective was telling me about her."
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's what you get for snitching, especially to the killer.
Which is an interesting choice, though, that he freely admits that he got this information just because someone else told him, which is a very normal, non-supernatural explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you're on the supernatural train with this weather-changing magic that allows him to be hypnotized, now it's like, oh, so he wasn't actually... Because you're wondering, how does he know? You know, just like with a doctor, like, did he... You know, is it, for lack of a better word, a mind-reading thing, or, oh, he was just told... So now you're, again, it's just sort of muddying those waters again of like what you're dealing with.
I'm not exactly sure some of the exact timeline right after this. I know they have a meeting with like the bigwigs of the police office. That doesn't go well. But I think the information we get there is that the detective can hear Mamma Mia talking to just him and nobody else hears him talking. And that freaks the detective out. Get away from me. And then he runs out. Was there anything else before he talks to Sakuma?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm just jumping around.
Okay. So let's just go to Sakuma, because I think that's interesting, the information that he gets. He found a tape from the university, I guess, that shows apparently some former Japanese professor from the late 1800s. I think the theory is that he took the knowledge, the information from like Mesmer, added his own occult, secret sauce in there, and his own ideas and philosophy. Like he merged the stuff together because it seems like it is this guy where the whole like crossing began. Because they only have one clip of this older lady who was in a healing ritual. And the Japanese professor, you don't see him. He's off to the side. You just see his hand. And when she's in a trance, he does that sign of the X or the cross. And it's pretty much like right after that, she ends up killing her son. It's just one that's like, did Mamma Mia find this information? And that's how he went on this path? Or it's again, those breadcrumbs of stuff that's like, maybe not, I don't know. But after he tells him this information, Sakuma tells him that pretty much he is a missionary. So wherever he learned this information, he is like putting forth in the world, which I believe he thinks is a cure. That, I believe, is where we get the title from. He is a missionary of people almost freeing themselves and letting go. So where that came from, whether it's from this Japanese professor, which show a picture of him that ends up coming up later.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yes. So that was a picture of the Japanese professor. That's why I'm saying, like, I do think the building he sees is in connection with that. And all the stuff in there is in connection to whatever this occult type group was. Whatever was going on here. Because Sakuma, the first time we see that building is in Sakuma's vision. Because, I mean, it's pretty much...
When does Sakuma get his trippy experience?
Right after, so they see the video. It's in his home. They see the video of them doing the cross. And that's when he does his trip out. And then it's like pieces come together for him. He goes, he's a missionary. That's why he says that, because it's almost like something comes together for him when he sees these things. Because pretty much he's been hypnotized too.
Yeah, so what's interesting is some point later, I forget when, but
it only takes a moment. He just could have had one conversation with the psychiatrist.
They're together in Sakuma's place, and Takabe looks over to the wall. He's like, how long has that been there? And there's a big old X that's been like...
When I saw that X, I was like, oh, fuck.
And he's like, oh, shit. And then Sakuma's there trying to, like, get rid of it, and he can't.
He's like,
clawing
at it because he knows what that means.
Yep. And he's like, did you talk to Miyama? And he's like, I don't remember. She's like, oof, we don't see what happens there yet.
You kind of know.
Yeah.
It's not going to be good.
Yeah, this is where everything really starts spiraling, because he's back at home, and...
Yes. Because I'm like, there's one other thing that happens before we...
And he sees there's, like, a meal set out. He opens up, and it's just a raw piece of meat that I guess she forgot to cook.
And that damn dryer is going.
Yeah. So he starts to lose it. He throws the meat against the wall and turns off the dryer. Then she comes out and turns it back on. Then he goes, turns it off again.
And then he goes to grab something, right? And it cuts away.
Yeah, so he goes into their room, and there's some bags that have been packed. Mm-hmm. I think for the trip.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, there's like tons of travel magazines.
Yeah. And I think he grabs a knife.
Yeah.
But then you don't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Then you just go on the trippy bus ride.
Yeah, so there's this weird, like, ethereally shot. Could have just been the film quality. Who knows? They're on the bus.
Yeah, they're on the bus. And
him and his wife.
And they're all like, or he's like, we're going on that trip, honey. And she's like, no, we're not. I ain't no dum-dum.
And finally taking her to the hospital.
He's like, just until after this case is done. It's better that she's here. I can't take care of her while I'm trying to close this up. And the doctor says, are you sure you're not working too hard? Because you look worse than your wife.
Mm-hmm. And I forget all the sequence of events, but basically, Miyama escapes.
Yep.
And
because it's the vibrations. He hits something that goes dong, dong, dong. Mm-hmm. And I think he did something to that the main key holder guy. Because you see him at one point where he's just sitting there, kind of dazed.
Oh, that's like the trigger.
Like I said, so it's like we have fire, water, and now vibrations. I'm pretty sure he planted something, so whenever he wanted to peace out, he did.
So he escapes, and at this point, Takabe's behaving very sort of strangely. He's much calmer.
Yes.
And he gets a call, something about Sakuma. Mm-hmm. And again, no real reaction on his face, but he heads over there, and they find that Sakuma is dead. They rule it a suicide. He was handcuffed to, like, his ceiling. I'm like, I don't know why he would do that. And again, no real reaction on Takabe's face. And so this is an interesting one in terms of, like, what really happened, right? Mm-hmm. Well, one, did any of this happen? Two, did Takabe kill him and stage it as suicide based on his own trigger?
Man, that didn't even enter my mind.
I think what I took from it is...
I think he did kill himself.
He killed himself. He knew that he was compromised, and he handcuffed himself so that he could not hurt anyone.
And if the trigger came, then he would just...
Yep.
See, that's what I took, especially the way he reacted when he found out.
Yeah. It's kind of a noble sacrifice. Like, he knew what it meant. He knew he was compromised and did the only thing he could think of, which was to make sure no one else got hurt. So, I mean, good for him.
Mm-hmm.
But again, no real reaction from Takabe.
No, it's just...
Yeah.
And then we get to the barn house. What is it?
Yeah, so then Takabe goes out and finds this building, which is the same one we saw in The Vision.
Yes. Which, there's not too much like creepiness in this movie, but when he's having that vision, there's like just a young man looking out of the window, and it's very blurred, just staring at him. And I'm just like, oh, creepy.
I think that's what he sees when he goes in, right? Because he sees the face like
behind the shower curtain.
Yeah, there's like this translucent shower curtain with his face behind it, so it's super creepy. And he goes up and pulls it away, and you realize it's just like a photograph, but just another little moment there.
Yep.
But yeah, he walks out into a big room, and there is
Mamma Mia.
Yeah.
What else does he say right before the inevitable happens?
Well, I mean, I asked him, like, why did you let me escape? For one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they talk, and Takabe kills him. He shoots him a couple times, and then...
This is important. He shoots him a couple times.
Leaves him alive long enough that he looks up at him and draws, like, the X in the air, and then he finishes him off, so...
Several times.
Yeah.
And that sucker ain't coming back.
So you're like, oh, the killer's dead. Good guys win, right?
Yeah, the ending is very...
And even
upsetting.
Even before then, it is interesting how you have a movie, again, that started with a very classic noir premise, then took the supernatural twist. They even captured him halfway through. And now the murderer, quote unquote, is dead. But it feels very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's because you know that there's more going on than that. But it is interesting how this would have been like the big, like, triumphant moment in a typical movie where, this guy who's caused all these horrible deaths.
this guy's never going to jail, so
no, is put down. But it's very, by this point, it's very unsatisfying. It's very, you are left feeling just as empty as he was, because
he almost. I also know this is like the typical detective trope of the bad guy giving a monologue at the end. Mm-hmm. He almost. Before he shoots him, it sounded like he was about to go into some kind of monologue. And then he's just like, nah. Not here for that. And then he just goes into another room that has like an old-timey...
phonograph thing. Yeah.
And it plays something that's just like garbled words. I guess some phrases. And you're just sitting there looking at it. And that's when we get the cut to the hospital, right?
Yeah. Very quick cut.
Very quick.
Where you see someone, I guess, in a wheelchair, a decaying corpse in a wheelchair with an X carved into it, emerge from the shadows to startle a nurse.
And it's Fume.
It's his wife.
And then it cuts to the last scene. He's at a cafe that he was at previously, and the same waitress comes up and talks to him. And this is what probably got to me the first time I watched it. Lightness, the burden had been lifted from him.
Yeah, he's much calmer.
Because she's gone. And I really think he killed her. And
yeah,
not only that, I think that's why he paused to let him do the X. I think he wanted.
Well, I mean, that's the question, is how much does that motion matter? Is that a thing that has some sort of physical power?
It might not have anything, but I think because symbols, they have meaning. And so that has a meaning.
Could be. That would imply he went back to the hospital and killed her. And I don't know, the corpse being sort of decayed too, like, makes it feel like it happened a while ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's just one of those things where Yeah. How long ago did this happen? Did she ever go?
Did she that? And I think that's the other thing is,
or did he just kill her and then just threw her into?
I think a lot of this a lot of his experience can be interpreted as glimpses into what all those other victims perceived when they went through their experiences, because they were in these sort of dazes, these trances where they didn't remember. But it's not like they were just blanks. It's not like, oh, I can't remember. It's like, no, I didn't do anything. Their perception of reality had changed from the trigger to they didn't remember the conversation, they didn't remember the trigger, and they didn't remember the action. And
That's true, because at the house, the barn, he says everybody, like people, they find their way here.
He also said something like,
to find
you realize this is your end too, like as well, like in addition to someone else, his own end, his wife's, I don't know. But so you have the trigger, the incident, and this perception of why it was right to kill that person in that moment. And we did see those 3 events with him.
Mm-hmm.
You have the moment where he's in his car and he starts seeing those flashes. Is that the trigger? Is that how you perceive the trigger when it happens? Is that what was going through all those other people's minds when they saw that light or that water?
Like this flip of, because that's kind of what we saw with Sakuma.
Yeah.
So it's like when he saw the X happen on, like, say the television screen, did that trigger him?
And then you have him going home and finding his wife dead. Now, at that point, he's not reacting to it in a way that's relief. He is very distraught.
Yes.
But is that how one would perceive that, like, earworm that gets in of, like, you have the trigger and you have the visualization, her dead. It wasn't real, but it gets you, now it's in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Her dead.
Yes.
And then you have the actual act. What happened when they killed them, and what did they perceive while they were doing it? They perceived something. Could it have been that they just blacked out? Or were they presented with a coping mechanism, a way that their brain saw what they were doing? And to him, it was taking her to the hospital. Because we see him go into that room and grab a knife, and then it just cuts away, and now we're on the bus. And it's this almost dreamlike composition.
I think that was very purposeful when they're on the bus, and like the cloudiness of, because it looks very different from everything else in the movie. I really think he killed her at that moment.
Which means by the time he's gotten to the barn, she's already been dead. Potentially. And again, this isn't me going...
Our interpretations. Believe me.
The Cure Explained. Subscribe, like, smash that bell.
You want to get 1,000 other theories? Go to Reddit. Holy crap. Everybody has their own different theory.
But it's definitely, that is then one way of looking is, oh, okay.
Yes.
What you've been seeing is, I don't know about an unreliable narrator, but you've been literally seeing through his eyes about what this hypnotism looks like from the other end. Like, what are you seeing when this is happening, and how does this manifest in your mind when you're going through these things that you normally would never do, that your brain is unable to handle?
Because I think we can trust what we're seeing up until he meets him in the hospital, and he's in the shadows, and he's smoking his cigarette, and you just see the light of the cigarette. I think that's the moment where everything changes, and it's like everything from there is a little suspect.
Yeah.
I think some of it is real, and I think you're right. Some of it is in his mind, the hypnotism.
Yeah, hypnotism, coping mechanism, whatever you want to call it.
Which is interesting, because if seeing her dad is kind of like the earworm, I wonder with Sakuma if it was something to do with the detective. Because remember, the last thing he sees before he snaps out of it is he sees he goes into the Mamma Mia cell.
Mm-hmm.
It has the bathtub with the mummified monkey.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you see the detective coming out of the shower, coming towards him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and remember that the psychiatrist has been worried about this guy. He's like, you're emotional, you're on the edge. Is the earworm that he's afraid the detective is going to harm him?
And maybe he does. Maybe it wasn't a suicide then. Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
Get him out of the way. Who knows?
Who knows?
I like to think of it as...
I think it was suicide
it could
myself.
go many different ways.
Myself, but I'm wondering if the detective was the plant in his mind. Just the way the images we saw, especially compared to the images that the detective saw. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And then back at the cafe, which we digressed from a bit.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the whole
He's just
coming together.
There, super calmly eating his coffee.
This
and then
is like the lightest we've seen him.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so is he unburned because of the killer's now dead? Or because his wife is gone? You know what I mean? Could be everything.
Or because he has now emptied himself. Like the killer did. And taken his place. Because that was another thing I saw. It was just like, you don't know. Because what happens is the waitress, after she serves him, she goes over to the back. And you just see her in the background.
I guess a manager or something just comes up to her and says something to her. She's like, something. Oh. She goes.
Some kind of trigger.
Goes to table, is taking an order. Goes, turns, takes a knife.
And starts
moving like in a very direct
towards someone.
And it's like, oh, she's getting that man. You know, it's like.
Yep.
But he barely talks to her. And that I think is interesting too, because a lot of theories seem to be revolved around like, was he becoming the vessel always the plan?
Right.
Especially with Fume and her. Like, is she hypnotized too? Is she a plant? Is he been hypnotizing her? Like, just a lot of theories going on about like, why is Fume also have this amnesia type thing? But I do think it's interesting. And the last thing I wrote in my notes is, when the detective and Mamma Mia are in that cell and they're having that big discussion, the back and forth, right before that water trickles down and he has his big breakdown about like his wife being a bird. Like the killer just looks at him in astonishment and goes, "You're amazing." And then he's silent again. He says, and then he mentions, "You're amazing." And a part of me wonders if, because it seems like he is, the missionary worked, he converted, in essence, the detective.
Right.
And now he is even more efficient in a way.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because, I was telling Jonathan, I was reading a little bit about the background on the movie. The original name for the movie was Evangelist. He changed it because I believe it was November of 96, Tokyo had the subway attacks, which was by a religious group. So even though the movie is not religious per se, I understand that the studio, the producers, they were worried with the title, especially right after that attack. They're like, oh, we just don't want the connotations. We just think it would be in bad taste. And the director agreed, and that's why he went with Cure. But he did say that, like, for him, that's what the name was. And especially with the psychiatrist calling him a missionary. So it is interesting. I do think there is an element of like transference that's part of this movie. Part of the themes of like transferring the anger, the hypnotism, like everything. There's definitely some kind of thematic element with like pushing forth the ideology. There's a lot to talk about. Yeah. I feel like there's so many things we could talk about. You
could talk about this from a plot or theme perspective from about 11 different angles.
Yes.
And follow each thread to completion and come up with a whole new theory.
Or the video we saw on Criterion about the tone where the guy... So
such a terrible video.
I don't want to blast the guy because he is a director, but his stuff is on Criterion, so they might have come up to him and go, hey, is there a movie you want to talk about? He's like, oh, would love to talk about Cure and, the tone, which is important. Like, the tone of the movie is critical to how we interpret things in the movie. But the way he went about it is that every time when he was talking about it and he was referencing like, oh, like this, and he was just naming movie after movie. Like, I think it's
name drop the video.
It's a 17-minute video, and I'm pretty sure there was 50 name drops of all Criterion
movies. Could have been
movies.
a 2-minute video that was stretched out to 17 minutes or whatever by just going, just like this movie, and then they would show a clip of the movie. Blah blah blah. Like this movie, show a clip of the movie. Over and over and over again, talking so slow. It's just like, you really are trying to stretch this out to 17 minutes.
Can we talk about Cure? I want to know about Cure.
More than just a word association game, stringing concepts together.
It's interesting because I've watched some videos, did some research, and it really is kind of all over the place. like when people talk about this movie, like what they gravitate towards, like what is their concerns and questions about the movie, what they focus on, which to me is probably, I think is a good sign of a good movie. Because, I mean, there's discussions from, kind of like plot. Someone did like a whole, what they think the timeline of like leading up to this was. And I'm like, sure, that's fun, but to me, it's not what I'm concerned about. To really like in-depth conversations, like, Fumi's presence in the movie, like what she represents.
Yeah, because we didn't really talk about her much, but yeah, you could probably, in our interpretations, we sort of sidelined her a bit, but yeah, you could probably do an interpretation of this with almost her as the focus, because she is the opening scene.
She's critical. And what does she mean? How is she there? Why does she have this kind of like mysterious...
In some ways, we just sort of had to drop her,
I know,
for our purposes, just so it wouldn't be a 3-hour podcast. But yeah, it just goes to show you the depth of it and how much you can get from it from multiple rewatches, discussions. For our purposes, when we saw the interview with Kurosawa and the director of Evil Does Not Exist, I thought that really struck me because I'm like, oh yeah, these are two great companion pieces, I think. I think that would be a great double feature because they both tackle similar themes of like the nature of evil and anger and similar settings of like a peaceful, normal environment with sudden outbursts of violence.
Yes.
Like that really struck me, but with very different, I think, potential conclusions. Again, we already talked about this, and it could have 15 different potential conclusions, but I think they're both, and it's an interesting study on like the nature of humanity, of anger and all those things, and how different people can view them differently.
Yeah, because Evil Does Not Exist is more like humanity in terms of like how we view nature, how we treat nature.
And how much we have in common with nature.
Yeah, and what that says about us. Where here it's like, dealing with things just underneath the surface and what that says about us. And again, it seems like it was really easy to get these people to kill other people. And I think that thematically is probably the biggest center point when he says, you can't tell someone to go against their base nature. And I'm like, well, shit, what does that say about us?
So it's a small line, it's a key line, because just by uttering it, you already know all of their assumptions, which is that, oh, well then you couldn't do it because no one thinks this.
And I've heard this before.
Therefore,
and I've heard this line before too, like, oh, you can only be hypnotized if you like want to be hypnotized.
Right.
Like if you're like, oh, I don't want this to happen, then it's not going to happen. I don't know. It's just, I think it's a great movie that's complex, layered. Again, we could probably talk another hour about this. We could go on. But for the purposes of the podcast, we probably should wrap up. Do we have any final thoughts?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this movie?
Fuck you. I refuse.
How about we do like those schools that don't have grades? Let's rate it from helicopter to cabbage. Choose the word that associates.
Mamma mia. Here I go again.
That's what plays after every murder. Here I go again. All right. What's up next?
I think after this, we're getting into Dune Prophecy.
Finally.
Oh, wait. No, we do have another movie.
Never mind.
I'm a liar. Before Dune Prophecy.
Oh, Heretic. Right.
Which is also why I want to do this movie. I kind of want a similar vibe, get the horror feels.
Right.
But this, I'm so excited because I love religious horror. And this is, as two girls that are Mormons, I'm so excited.
Should be a good time.
So then after Heretic is when we are going to go on our Dune Prophecy journey. Yeah. So at that point, we'll probably be switching our podcast episodes to, I'm thinking Friday, because I think the episodes are like Sunday night. And we need turnover time. We're not like some other podcasts where they can, churn and burn these out. I need to edit.
Yep.
Go see this movie, please. It's great. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.